What does it take to name a brand for a market you've never stepped into? This is How the World Names, conversations with members of We Are Naming, the global network of experts shaping the future of international brand development. In this series, we explore what's wonderful and weird about the languages, cultures, and countries we represent.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the How the World Names. I'm Felipe Valério. I'm the Brazilian representative of We Are Naming, and I'm here with the inspiring and multi-talent, yes, I'm a fan, of Caitlin Barrett, our US partner, and also your host on the previous episodes of this show. Caitlin, welcome to your show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be a guest.
Oh, that's awesome. Great moment from me also. Caitlin, let's start talking about your background. How did you get into naming? How your naming practice is like today? Share whatever you want, just for us to have an idea of a journey inside the naming world.
Yeah, I mean, I think like most of us, I stumbled into this. This is an accidental career that I'm entering my 20th year on. I've told this story so many times, but I love to tell it. I got out of college. I studied Spanish in college, and I thought I would go to grad school to study Spanish linguistics. And I said, "Oh, I'll wait," and I just took jobs writing any kind of writing I could. I worked for a specialty food website reviewing snacks, which is very funny because I have so many food allergies that I didn't know at the time, and I was just like having allergic reactions. But I loved writing about food, and I took on a really bad job as a copywriter at an appliance company, which I somehow, like by so many miracles, ended up getting an offer to interview at Martha Stewart from there as a copywriter. And once I got to Martha Stewart, I had my first opportunities to name. I was the most junior person there. One of the jobs was to name the scented candles, which smell really awful, and no one else wanted to do it. And so I would sit with like this like blanket over my head and smell the candles and come up with names. And then I'd work with a lawyer to figure out which ones we could actually use on the packs. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. Like I liked it. And I got to name other stuff there, not knowing at all that my career would become naming. And I just managed one job to the next, getting to do naming until I worked under Rachel Bernard at Interbrand, who was so incredible. And it's still one of my life mentors when she was the head of the naming practice there. And then when she left, I stepped up and got to know so many people, including you, from all over the world that did naming. And I started my own naming practice in 2016. And then here I am still naming
Awesome.
after all these time. Yeah.
Awesome. That's an impressive journey. Thanks for sharing, Caitlin. Caitlin, you wrote a report about what people should know or need to know about naming in the US. By the way, we make it available in the show notes and also in our We Are Naming website. So let's dive into some of these topics. And the first one, we started with a very interesting approach to diversity and how vast United States is, like different languages, different cultures from region to region, and no single American naming style. So based on that, how do you believe people could embrace this diversity to get the best of the name, and also what clients and brands that aim to come to this market should know about how diverse US is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really easy to reduce Americans to certain stereotypes, and I certainly don't blame anyone who does. We have a lot of very interesting cultural exports. But I think it's the true thing of naming anywhere is to get as specific as you can about who you're trying to reach. You know, if you're trying to reach academics, that's a really different audience than teenage snack lovers. So trying to like really put yourself in the mind of like who who's going to buy, who's going to care about this, and like what are they actually going to care about, and to just start with as detailed and as empathetic and as authentic of a profile as you can. of that person and really try to like build your approach to naming based on that. And that can include like what languages do they speak or what languages are they likely to be familiar with. And all of that can inform, an approach to naming that doesn't try to name for every single type of person you could find in the US because we have like every single type of person
Hmm.
here. It's too much to think about everything all at once. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like it's for everyone, but it's not so broad name.
Never
Yeah,
really. Yeah.
yeah. And Caitlin, it reminds me of the linguistic perceptions that you mentioned in your report. When a brand, a name sounds misintended or even offensive, and you shared some examples of brands that some brands decided to adapt their names, other brands decided to educate the market. So, how is your feeling? How is your perspective about this linguistic perception, and what brands should be aware of when they are like entering the market with their names?
It's so funny because, like, a lot of our work, right, is we want to help people avoid linguistic disasters. We want to do everything that we can to keep a brand from entering a market and saying, hey, we're this, and everyone going, well, that's not what we're seeing in the name. And one of my greatest joys of naming is, getting to find out what words I think are harmless, cute, great, even, and finding out they mean things that are so offensive. But at the same time, I've been shocked so many times over the years to see brands use names that, would have failed one of our checks, right? We would have said, don't use that. That carries this association, that means this. And we have plenty of brands here. And I know that like you've pointed to ones in Brazil, right? You said Cisco, which is, a very huge technology company in Brazil. You pointed out like you'd say, oh, I have a Cisco, like I have like a fleck in my eye. It's annoying. And they've managed to be perfectly successful there, from what I understand. And we have so many examples of those here too. Like my one of my favorite brands growing up, I would see the trucks all around Los Angeles because in California, a lot of Mexican brands, very popular there. And there's this Mexican like baked goods company called Bimbo, Bimbo. So cute. And, we use that in the US to mean usually in an insulting way, an unintelligent woman. And it's hasn't seemed to keep them from being successful. They use the name. It hasn't changed. So there's lots of examples of that. And I think if you're willing to stand by your name and withstand some jokes, like a lot more is possible than we think, especially if you've established your name in another country, right? And bring it here. But an example that I find really fun where they did change their name was there's a Japanese brand, beverage brand. I think it's like a milky. I've never had it. I know people who have gone to Japan and they really, really like it. And their name in Japan, I don't know exactly like how they would pronounce it there, but I will say it how I would pronounce it if I saw it, is Calpis, Calpis. And I remember, I think even at Interbrand, we might have done some disaster checking with them to understand, like, could they come to the U.S. With that name? And I won't claim credit that like we were the ones to tell them not to do that, but I think we did. I don't know. But they ended up going to market with a different name in a lot of English-speaking countries as Calpico. So they keep that kind of telegraphic start of the name, that CAL piece, but just made the decision that they probably couldn't overcome our English ear of hearing cow piss and hearing cow
Mhm.
piss and thinking about a farm animal taking a little break during the day. So that's like, I think, a good example of two extremes, right? Of just like, let's roll with it. Yeah, it's kind of funny, or this is too extreme. And like, I think in the case of cow piss too, you're seeing like it's a drink and the association with it, if it's cow pee, is too gross. That's too strong of a connection. Whereas like bimbo, it's baked goods. Yeah, it's a name for maybe like an insult you would use, but it's not going to keep you from consuming it. And another one that I'm obsessed with that I just found out when I was writing this report is there's a Japanese diaper brand called Goon. It's stylized as, I think, GOO.N for whatever reason. Um, And in Japan, it means it's referring to a word that refers to a baby's steady growth. How beautiful, right? Like thinking about diapers, and you probably have to get different sizes, and my baby's growing, and that's a great story. But here, we use the word goon in a lot of ways that are not not supportive of like the story of your little precious baby. We use it to mean like kind of like a henchman or kind of a dummy, and then like a newer usage that I won't get into on this podcast that's way less family friendly. And I'm just curious about it. It's newer to the US, I think. And it'll be interesting from a branding perspective to see like, do they end up changing their name to reach a broader market, or will it matter? I don't know. So long journey to get to the piece of advice that sometimes there's more wiggle room than you think to use a name that carries meanings that aren't inherently positive, but it really depends, and it's worth doing a little bit of assessment before just like diving headfirst into using a name that you're not totally sure about.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's we cannot say that there's just one rule, right? Like
Right.
depends on context, depends on the client, and but that's a difficult feeling when we create a story that's so cute, and then we found
I
out
know.
that it's not that cute, so it's difficult.
The big heartbreak of naming, truly.
Yeah, for sure. And this is really connected, Caitlin, to another topic you mentioned in your report about the US, which is how trends move very fast in the US. And you have something really beautiful for me. It's thinking truths is better than thinking trends. Like thinking truth is better than trends. So like pursue the truth behind the brand and also the what this brand aims to say. So I would like to talk a bit about it. This trendy aspect of names, because we know that names need to survive over time. So how is that feeling? How clients deal with that feeling of something really fresh, but they need it to be like alive for 10, 15, 20 years? How to handle this? How to find the sweet spot between like originality and your truth, your brand truth? How to handle that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always trying to find a balance. And I will talk about this through the lens of like how I think about my practice. I know that people run sometimes their naming practices in a way that is more oriented around trends, and they're really good at like seeing emerging trends and capturing them and kind of having their names reflect that in a way that can be like really great for short-term traction, like hit the ground running. People really are picking up on the signal you're putting out there that like this is a brand that's doing something new and right now, or of the moment. Maybe not new, because I think if something's already established as a trend, maybe you're kind of riding a wave a little bit. But you're able to like be part of the moment, if you're able to name kind of according to a trend. And we saw so much of that very telegraphically in the early to mid 2000s with certain suffixes, the IFY names and the dropping of vowels, and a lot of that naming that was driven by availability of .com URLs. But I think, like, to your point, names should last a really, really long time, especially if you're naming a company, but even a product or a service. Like, there are product and service names that endure for decades, and in so many cases we can pinpoint the moment that brand came into be. You'll be like, oh, that's such an 80s name. Like, it has like maybe a certain sort of like techie quality. It ends in an X or something like that. Like, we remember those names for the 80s. Maybe an earlier name, has a much longer, more serious name. It's much more heavy. So there kind of is an inevitable kind of anchoring yourself in a point in time or a certain industry, because that's what happens. But I think, anchoring your name in what's most true about you and who you want to connect with will always give you the name that you can live with the longest. Um, and you look at names that are really strong, whether they're just the most prominent names. You got Apple and you've got Amazon. Those are great, like simple real word names. They're very hard to get. But some of the names that are also like really successful brands, Costco. Microsoft. Those aren't cool. Those aren't cool styles of names. They're kind of descriptive, but like a little bit different. And then you've got like right now, huge because of AI is like NVIDIA. That's a hard name to say. It's kind of strange. We're comfortable with it now. We use it. Starbucks, has nothing to do with coffee. So you have all these types of names, and they're all evidence that like anything can work if you're willing to kind of align your business and your brand and your experience with them and make that mean something in the minds of consumers. I think that's way more important and will kind of stand the test of time better than trying to like align with the current trend, because that will change in a week, in a month, in a year.
Yeah, for sure. Imagine like waking up and pretending your name should say something. That's tough. Like creating
Yeah.
creating some stories behind it just for you to pretend like your name supports some story. That's tough. Like that's easier just to come up with a name that
Just be
can
yourself.
share this. Yeah, be
It's the,
yourself.
it's the best brand advice. I know it's so
Yeah.
embarrassing to like just constantly feel like a parent. Like just be yourself, sweetheart. But it's true.
Yeah, that's it. And also that is truly connected with something that uh, all namers should keep in mind, which is the legal aspect. So it's impossible to talk about naming without talking about trademarks and legal challenges. And I want to raise that question to you, Caitlin, because I have the feeling that US is really tricky about it. Firstly, because the amount of trademarks is incredible, and also because I realized that there are some specifications that are a bit different from other places. For example, you have to use your brand really fast. Can you give your thinking about this, about the challenges, and also for people, for brands who are aiming to come to US, which challenges are they going to face when it comes to trademark?
So I will actually quote our former We Are Naming partner in Mexico, Rodrigo, who said, "We see creativity as a legal imperative." And I think about that all the time, because it is so hard to get a name through legal clearance. And I will give you an example of, we were working on a project earlier this year in the automotive space, and the list for that project reached 7,000 names. We screened for trademark conflicts, 1,500 names, and there were about 50 that were, worthwhile to talk about. And that included some linguistic screening. So a lot of names fell out for that, but most of them fell out for trademark reasons. And it is so hard to secure a trademark. And I think we're seeing, well, I think people are never prepared for how tough it's going to be to fall in love with a name, find out you can't have it, have to move on, and you have to move on quickly. So the numbers game is there, and that sucks because you want it to be this thoughtful, creative, intentional project. Oh my God, we're saying this perfect thing in this perfect way. Here it is. It's so precious. It's so special. But when you find out you can't use it, you need to then be really nimble and consider other things and consider, what did I love about that? How else could I say that? How else could I get that across? How can we make sure people are making the connections that we're making between, what we're going to be and how we're going to talk about it? So like the numbers game there, and the creativity piece can feel really at odds with each other when you haven't done this a lot. I think our process is so oriented around that volume and being willing to look at so many options and look at things that like you didn't maybe think we're going to be where you ended up, and having some openness there. Maybe something that's a little longer, maybe a construct that's phrasal, maybe it's constructed differently than you expected. If you are expecting like a real word name that's really positive, I think there was a Harvard study from almost a decade now, and the title was "All the Good Names Are Taken." So your options tend to be maybe some real words that aren't quite as positive, or quite as short as you were hoping, but you can find a great name if you're willing to think about your strategy a little bit differently. And we go through this on every single project, like where we think we're going to be at the start and where we end up. We're often expressing the same thing, but not in the way that everyone maybe thought we would at the beginning.
Yeah, I love that the good names are taking. That's that's a bit sad, and that's funny because I have a friend who once told me, Felipe, I love words, and I asked him, do you like lawyers also? Because like
Love your
it's
legal.
impossible. Yeah, it's impossible for yes, love your legal.
Love your
I will have
legal.
a T-shirt with that because it's really like we moved from the pre-screening to the trademark strategy. They are much more strategic and how we can do, how can we avoid these pitfalls. So it's like it's an intelligence behind that search.
It really is. Yeah. And I think people should be prepared to think about it in a couple of steps, right? Like first we understand, is there anything obvious that would keep us from using this name? Someone has this exact mark registered. Great. We know we can't use it. That's easy to set aside. But sometimes, and I always recommend using a lawyer as you get towards registering a name, because they can really help you understand, like, this might not seem like an obvious conflict to you, but this does present a risk. Maybe you don't see how these two names are similar, but they can tell A, that they could make a case, and B, that, that mark holder is really litigious and they do have a history of going after people who have similar names. I've had people say to me, no, Caitlin, I'm going to, yes, the name is spelled the same as this other person, but we're going to pronounce it differently. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. So there's so much that goes into that, and it doesn't matter what your intentions are, and it doesn't matter if you don't know the other person was using the name. Like they could still potentially prevent you from using that name, and it's really worth the consideration to make sure you've got something you can use from the beginning, because it's very heartbreaking to have to change your name once you've already told the world
Yeah,
your
for
story.
sure, for sure, for sure. Caitlin, I have a curiosity. Just you can tell me about the different English. What I mean, for example, the English that's not the U.S. English. For example, color with U or realize with S. How does it sound or how does it feel for Americans when a brand uses a name like this? You're like, here's our twin brothers, they are foreigners. How does it work? Because we don't have it in Portuguese, actually. How does it work? Like, what's the impression that a name written in English, but in an English that's not American English, does it change anything about the perception?
It really depends. Like there's some things that are just like straight up funny to us. Like I love the UK spelling of diarrhea. It looks really weird to us because I'm just so used to the US spelling of diarrhea. And like I was very proud in my report to include the word diarrhea. But I think when you think about neighbor and color, when you've got the U in there, or if you're using a different word, like we call, a truck that drives things to be delivered a truck. In the UK, they call it a lorry. So there's like tells, and it's totally fine. You go, okay, that's maybe if it's the U in color, that could be the UK, that could be Canada. We just know it's not from here, and I think that's totally fine as long as you're not pretending that it's from here. I work with a ton of global brands that have operations in the US and the UK, and if we're doing things beyond just naming, or even if we are just doing naming, we have to ask the question of which English, what do you typically use in communication? And it seems like kind of a minor question at first, but it becomes really important, especially again, we're going to like consider trademarks. We want to use the spelling we're gonna use, and we want to be consistent around the world. So just kind of thinking that through, like if you're trying to reach an English speaking audience broadly, and maybe some other non-US markets are really important, maybe like that other spelling or spellings. I'm not going to say there's only two Englishes, there's ours and everybody else's. um but to really think that through and run it by speakers in all of the countries you plan to use that name, and just kind of see, like, do you get something from it? Like, the way, like, Italy is, we think fashion brands and things like that. Like when I see a spelling that looks a little more UK to me, that might carry some more like kind of UK style associations, like something having to do with like royalty or history, that just by nature of the spelling, maybe I can indicate some of those associations that wouldn't be there if I used the US spelling.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That makes, and I imagine also these slangs, like these slangs are totally different. Like
Yeah.
if a startup wants to create something really different, probably this slang is not that global,
Yeah, true.
even if it's English. Caitlin, I will ask you something that you asked everyone in our series, How the World Names. I think that was the toughest question you made me. Uh, I would like to know a name in English that you think, in your opinion, totally appropriate from the culture, from this amazing environment. The name that really reflects the power of great U.S. naming. Uh, what's that naming, Caitlin?
This I still don't have an answer. I've been stressed out about this all week. So I rather than like talk about a certain style of name or a certain name, I'm gonna just bring up a kind of representative of a way we think about things here. Maybe this is very global, but here where I live in upstate New York, there's a chain of gas stations called Stewart's. It's just the name Stewart, and this goes hand in hand with it being like a very beloved gas station. If I'm on a corner and it's a very American corner where there's four different gas stations, there might be a Gulf, there might be a Citgo, there might be an Exxon, and there's a Stewart's. I'm picking the Stewart's because I have such an affinity to the way Stewart's is. I mean, it's still like if you came here, Felipe, you'd be like, okay, number one, really sad that you guys love gas station culture so much. It's very, but Stewart's like, because it's like this personal name, in this category that is, like dominated by like kind of, big gross oil company type brands, it feels really local and it feels really close to home, and it's like a very like local pride thing. Like I just found out that people call it Storts who've lived here for a long time. I call it Stewie's,
Mhm.
and it's a type of name that people can develop an affection for and talk about in a very familiar way. And I think like when brand names can reflect the types of relationships we have with them and a sense of like local or regional pride or some kind of like self-identification with it, I think that's one of many things that great naming can do for you. But I think their position as this like very local, cool, not cool, but cool. They have. I have a Stewart's hat I wear all winter, and they're cool enough that like I want to wear Stewart stuff. Really comes from them having the ability to like carry a personal connection that doesn't come across in a name like Exxon, right? Like I would never. That would be gross. That would be horrible. I would never wear Exxon clothing. But it's so that's a very meandering answer, and I'm sure I could have given you 50 different answers. I almost said McDonald's because it's just like in a single brand name, they are able to export all of American culture. But I'm gonna go with Stewart's. That's my final answer.
Oh, that's awesome. I love to know that that's a name you want to be friends with, right?
Totally. You're friends
Stuart.
with Stewie, Stewart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I loved it. That's also really Brazilian. These nicknames, I
It's
loved
true. It's true.
it.
I'm just being Brazilian about it, really.
Yeah, you are. You are. That's awesome. That's awesome. Caitlin, before we end our awesome conversation, I wanna suggest a game that we are also doing the other episodes. It's really fun. Uh, I would like you to say to me a word, a sentence, an expression in English that you think probably I probably don't know, and I will try to guess it. What do you think about that?
Okay, so at first I was going to give you some jujitsu lingo, but then I was like, no, that's too close to home. I that's too
That's so
Brazilian.
Brazilian.
That's too Brazilian. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a sentence from the world of powerlifting. Right? Have you ever gotten into powerlifting?
No.
Okay, great, great. Okay, so I can stump you because this has been such a humiliation. Everyone has stumped me so bad, and at least I get to stump you. So I have it. I have it on a little post-it here. All right, here's the sentence. Last time I ran a Candido program, I hit 145 at an RPE of 10. What does that mean?
God, what is that? Can you repeat, please?
Oh my God, I love your face. All right. Last time I ran a Candido program, I hit 145 at an RPE of 10.
Katie, I have no idea. What's Candido?
Okay. So I will break this down for you, and it's so
Okay,
dorky.
okay.
Okay, there's a power lifter named Johnny Candido. He's a guy. And there are various things associated with his reputation, but he developed this program, 6 weeks bench pressing program that I have run at least a dozen times. I love it. You just bench every day, 5 days a week. You bench press. You don't do anything else, and nothing else matters. You're only focused on your bench press, and you get so tired from bench pressing that you can't squat or deadlift or anything else. You just bench. And so that's the Candido program. When I say Candido program, it's a 6 weeks
Okay.
bench pressing program. So when I say I hit 145, that means I bench pressed 145 pounds at an RPE, which stands for rate of perceived exertion. So like how hard was it? An RPE runs on a scale of 1 to 10. So basically, like if it's an RPE of 1, you feel like you could do 10 more reps. If it's an RPE of 10, you can't do anymore. So when I say I hit 145 at an RPE of 10, that means 145 was the absolute most I could lift, which is the absolute most I've ever bench pressed. I'm not that strong. And I'm talking in pounds, not kilos. So don't get impressed.
Okay.
So when I say I ran a Candido program, I hit 145 an RPE of 10, that means I ran a 6 weeks bench pressing program, and I was able to get 1 rep at 145 pounds at the end of it. And that's my sentence.
Caitlin, no, that's impressive. We need the naming RPE.
we do. I've done a lot of RPE of 10 naming this year where I'm just like, I don't have any more names left. I am. Felipe,
you just see how accurate I was. Like, what is Candido? Candido is who, is not what.
Exactly. No, I know. I'm glad I stumped you. I did not think that you were going to get that. I felt like if I threw some jujitsu at you, you would have had too good of a chance at guessing.
Yeah. Oh, Caitlin, thanks a lot for that. Always incredible to talk to you, to listen to your perspective, your experience. You are not only a person who is really into the naming, but also spreading the message and educating. And this is really incredible from a perspective of people who are always like loving to know more about a discipline that is not totally understood by people, clients, consultants. So it was a pleasure for me to talk to you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be a guest. Thank you for hosting. You did a great job. I'm so happy to just show up today.
Thank you. We switched positions today. Oh God, this sounds so tough. And thank you everyone for joining us. See you next time.
Thank you for listening. How the World Names is produced by me, Caitlin Barrett. Music is by Alex Kulik. Subscribe to our newsletter at wearenaming.substack.com and submit a question for a future episode. If you'd like to partner with us on a global naming project, visit wearenaming.com to find out more.